What are you eating at Hattah Desert Race? Do you need to have Steg pegs on your bike? What happens if you can't stomach food while you're out there racing? I'm gonna answer all of your Hattah Desert Race prep questions right now. What should I eat during Hattah Desert Race? So when you're thinking about food that you want to be eating through Hattah Desert Race, the main thing that comes up is you're probably not going to be able to stomach proper food. So this is where your supplements come in. So the way that we work it with our riders is for breakfast in the morning, that will be really their last solid meal of proper food. So 3 to 4 hours before they start the race, they'll have their breakfast. They'll have a serving of protein. So it could be steak, could be some shortcut bacon, could be some lean sausages, could be some pork, any form of good quality meat. And then they'll have that with some carbohydrates. But we want to use complex carbohydrates. So complex carbs are broken down slowly by the body. So complex carbs include things like sweet potatoes, could be like brown rice, quinoa. You could use oats, protein oats that come in a packet, a supplement pack are a great option for race day because they're really easy. So what that's going to do is that is going to be quite heavy on your stomach, but remembering that we've got 3 to 4 hours before you go and race to be able to digest it and break it down and then be able to use it for energy in the race. So that's about 4 hours before. Half an hour then before the race is you want to start to load up on simple carbs. So simple carbs are sugars, whether that's through sugar or whether that's through fructose through fruit. So you can have a carb gel, say half an hour before you go and race. You could have a piece of fruit or a couple of pieces of fruit. You could have a Powerade. The problem with Powerade though is obviously it's in liquid form. So if you're getting in 600 mils of Powerade half an hour before you go and race, you might feel like going to the toilet in the first half hour of racing. So you might find it easier to stick with the gels or stick with the carb powders. Ultimately, what we're looking for is we want to have 30 to 45 grams of simple carbs going in, roughly half an hour before you go and race. That's going to top up your carbohydrate stores, which is your main fuel source that you're using over the 4 hours of racing. Once you get into the racing, this is probably the important part, is what we've done up until this point is we've topped up your fuel tank. Okay, we've got your body's fuel tank up to 100%. Now, as you're going through the race, that fuel tank's going to inch down. So what we want to do is we want to keep topping it up, keeping it as close to 100% as we can throughout the whole race. And the way that we do that is we use simple carbs again, but we need to have a top-up strategy. So the same way that you have a fueling strategy for your bike, you have to have a fueling strategy for your body. So for every hour of riding that you have, you want to be getting in 30 to 45 grams of carbs. So a bottle of Powerade, 600 ml bottle, is about 35 grams of carbs. A carb gel could be anywhere from 20 to 40 grams of carbs, depending on the carb gel that you get. So for every hour, you want to make sure that you're getting in a couple of carb gels or at least a bottle of Powerade, and you want to do that for every hour. So if you've got 20 gram carb gels that you're having, get 2 of them in every hour, which means you should be having about 8 of those over the 4 hours to be able to make sure that you're fueled up correctly and you're topping up your fuel tank again back to 100% each time. And that's going to make sure that you have done the prep work beforehand to have a full fuel tank to start with, and then making sure, again, that it's really important that you make sure you top up that fuel tank. You're not just going to be able to survive on what you had for breakfast, and that's not going to be able to drag you through for 4 hours, well, at a good speed, a good intensity anyway. What do riders waste money on for Hattah Desert Race? So I'd say the biggest thing riders waste, I guess, like motorsport takes a lot of money as it is, like, you know, bikes, travel, entry fees, getting out to the track, paying for a coach for training, paying for a coach for skills, entry fees, everything, right? It takes a fair bit of cash. What do riders waste money on? From my perspective, I'm all about making progress. Like for me, when I was racing and with anything, I like to see progress in the things that I'm doing. So when it comes to money, it's like, okay, what are the things that I need to invest in to help me to be able to make progress? So people spend money on all sorts of stuff. Could be, you know, getting new stickers, could be having a brand new bike when they've got a bike from last year they could have used. It could be buying a new exhaust system. It could be getting the motor done. Could be getting this track suspension, or, you know, getting Öhlins inserts for the forks. Whole heap of stuff. But sometimes those things, depending on where you're at and what your weakness is, sometimes those things are a good investment or sometimes they're a waste. If you don't have fitness and you've already had the suspension done and then you're like, oh, I need to drop 10 grand on suspension to get it all sorted, well, it's probably not going to help you as much as, say, spending 10 grand on your fitness. 10 grand is going to get you a fair bit of bloody fitness to be able to go and race. So maybe that's not the weakest link for you. Whereas for someone else, maybe they've got the fitness and they're riding well and they've got the skills on the bike, and maybe the 10 grand on the suspension is the thing that they need to get better. So a waste of money for one person is money well spent for another person. And then also, there's just, sometimes you just like buying stuff. Like when I was racing, I didn't always need a new bike, but I loved getting a new bike. So I used to get one, and that made me happy. I enjoyed having one, enjoyed being able to look after it and ride it. And you've got to do things you enjoy. It's not just about performance, but doing things you enjoy as well. Should you use caffeine at Hattah Desert Race? So caffeine is an interesting one. So caffeine has what's called a half-life. So if I remember correctly off the top of my head, it's got a half-life of about 4 hours. So what that means is when you take in caffeine, it stays in your system for 4 hours. And in 4 hours time, you're gonna have half the amount of caffeine that you consumed still in your system. And then 4 hours after that, you're still gonna have half the amount of the caffeine that you had at that 4 hour point, again at the 8 hour point. So for example, like a double shot coffee is about 120 milligrams of caffeine. So if you have a shot of coffee in the morning at a double shot coffee at say 8 o'clock in the morning, if we go 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, we had 120 grams going in when we first had it. By the time we get to hour 4, we've still got 60 milligrams of caffeine still circulating in our body. If we fast forward that another 4 hours, so we go to hour 8, we're then gonna have half of that. So 8 hours after we had that coffee at 8 o'clock in the morning, we're now gonna have 30 milligrams still circulating in our body. So caffeine's a stimulant and it's a great stimulant, but the problem is if you have caffeine all the time, number one, you get used to it, so you don't get the stimulating effects from it anymore. But number two, it also affects your sleep. So if I had our desert race being like pretty much a single day event, it's probably not too important. For races like say Think Desert Race, it might affect your recovery and affect your sleep between the 2 days. So when can you use caffeine for Hattah? Best use would be in that probably last hour of riding. So if you're really struggling, your energy's down, obviously you've been riding for 3 hours, so whether you've done training or not, it's gonna be hard. But if you're really down in the dumps, then that's when you can use caffeine. So you can use like a double shot of coffee, like a espresso or straight coffee that's not mixed with milk or anything else, like a double shot. You could use, they do caffeine shots or tablets that you can buy, you could use them, or you could use an energy drink like a Red Bull or a Monster Energy, if that's easier for you to get hold of and use. But the main thing is you don't want to be having it at the start. Okay, you're fresh at the start. You definitely don't need caffeine at the start. If you do, then there's something else there that's breaking down. So start off with using your carbs, using your food as your fuel. Then if you really need to, like you're really struggling at the end for that last hour, then that's when you can use caffeine maybe for your last stop or somewhere in that last hour to be able to pick you up a little bit and get you through the last bit of the race. Should I get Steg pegs for Hattah Desert Race? Probably not really the question for me, to be honest, but from what I've heard from a lot of the guys that we work with, they'll use them for Hattah and use them for Think Desert Race. Races where you're up on the pegs a lot, because it allows you to be able to take a little bit of the load out of your legs because you can lean back and rest on them a little bit. I'd say like they're good to be able to give you some additional support and make things easier, but they're not a crutch for doing like no fitness work. If you do no fitness work and no preparation, and then you're just relying on Steg pegs to get you through 4 hours, I don't think they're gonna give you that level of improvement. You've still gotta do a whole heap of work to get your body ready. The Steg pegs are more that extra 10%, 1%, depending on how much improvement you think that they give you, to be able to get better and make things a little bit easier out on the bike. Top 3 supplements for Hattah Desert Race. So top 3, I would say, first one would definitely be carbs or like some sort of carb drink or carb supplement. So whether that's through Powerade or using a carb drink or using the carb gels. Protein is another one. You can use, let's say, 10 or 15 grams of protein for every hour as well with the carbs. So that has been shown to be able to help with muscle recovery. Because you're throwing around a 100 kilo bike for 4 hours, it is quite strenuous on your muscles. So your muscles are breaking down. Protein is the building block to help your muscles repair. So it can be able to help with that process. So I'd say maybe number 2, protein. Third supplement, maybe to go in with number 2, maybe caffeine as well. And again, it just depends on your fitness levels and your energy levels. For some of you guys, you do lots of racing all the time, and a 4 hour race is something you're used to. You've been training hard. You're probably not going to need the caffeine to be able to get through. You're going to have the fitness and strength there. If you're really struggling or you're not used to racing intensity and then you're getting out there racing and at racing intensity and it's a decent jump up from what you've been used to, then your body probably is going to be breaking down no matter how much training and preparation you've done because you're not used to riding at that level. So that's when I would say caffeine can also be a great supplement to be able to help riders with their racing. I struggle to sleep the night before Hattah Desert Race because I get nervous. Anything you'd recommend? Good question. So a couple of things I can recommend for the night before. You can use magnesium. So you can use magnesium chelate, so CHELATE, which is highly absorbed or the best absorbed magnesium for our body. So you can try supplementing with that. You can get that from like Chemist Warehouse or a chemist, or even from supermarkets as well. But I'd first of all not just do that the night before, I'd probably do that in the weeks leading up so your body's used to it. You never want to try anything that you've never tried before the night before a race day. Okay, everyone reacts differently to different foods and different things. We want to do all the testing beforehand. You can try getting to bed a little bit earlier, or making sure that your sleep is up to scratch the nights before that. So if we're working on 8 hours of sleep a night and you've been getting 4 hours, 4 hours, 4 hours for the week before for whatever reason, and then you know that you don't sleep on race day night, that's going to make things worse. Whereas if you focus on getting 8, and then you get say 6 or interrupted sleep on that night before race day, it's not going to affect you as much when you ride. Third thing I'd say is make sure your nutrition's on track for the next day. If your sleep's not the best, then you go into the next day unorganized and unprepared, it's just going to make things 10 times worse. So make sure you're organized and make sure you're prepared. Nervousness most of the time is higher when we're doing something that's really important to us, or we're doing something for the first time. So if you've never raced Hattah Desert Race before and this is your first one, you probably will be really, really nervous, and there's not going to be much you can do about it. You're probably not going to sleep well, and that's just the facts of life. Whereas if you've done Hattah 5 times, you're probably not going to be as nervous because you know what you're in for. There's not as much anxiety and stress there going into the race. So outside of the things that I've recommended, it's just putting yourself in those uncomfortable positions. Another way that you can do that is get out to some races beforehand. If Hattah is the first race that you're doing, try and get out to some smaller enduros or other events to be able to help you manage the nerves. It's one of those things, like when I first started doing Olympic weightlifting competitions, it was the same thing. I remember one of the lifts I could do 90 kilos for, and that was my target for this first Olympic lifting competition, and I missed 70 kilos twice and then only just got it on the 3rd crack. So I was 20 kilos off what I could have actually done. And I had the strength there to be able to do it. It's just that I was nervous and stressed and didn't sleep well, and everything wasn't working well, and my body was tight and stiff because I didn't know what was going on. But then as I kept doing more of them, I just got more comfortable, and then I could perform how I wanted to perform. So biggest thing I'd say is try and get out to some practice days or practice races beforehand that are similar conditions, similar length of time, to be able to help prepare you, which will make you less stressed, less anxious, sleep better, and also able to stomach food and use your energy a little bit better as well. Should I be doing weights or cardio for Hattah Desert Race? Great question. So answer is you should be doing both. Strength, you got to think about the weight of your bike and your weight as well. So if you're riding say a 450, and let's say with all the gear on it, let's say it weighs 110 kilos. You've got a 110 kilo bike, plus you've got your body weight on top of that. Okay, so if you're weighing in at 80 kilos and your bike's 110, that's 190 kilos. So you need to wrestle around 190 kilos through the sand, through the desert for 4 hours, if not a bit more, depending on when you go through for that last lap. So the stronger you can get yourself, the lighter the bike's going to feel. The lighter the bike's going to feel, the less energy you'll use when you ride, because it's easier to muscle the bike around. So it's not whether you're strong or not strong, it's about how strong. So generally, if you can get yourself stronger, you're going to make things easier for yourself out of the race. On the cardio side, you also do need the cardio. The cardio is not just about strength, you do need the cardio as well, because your breathing and your lungs are going to be put to the test throwing around 190 kilos for such a long period of time. It's hard work. So there's 2 types of cardio. There's our longer duration cardio and our short, sharp duration cardio, and we need both. So the way that we do it with our guys is we get them to train their longer distance cardio by just riding. Okay, so when they get out on the weekend and they ride, we encourage them to do longer rides. Do a 2, 3, 4 hour ride on the weekend rather than just going out there and doing half an hour. If Hattah Desert Race is your goal, that's your target. If racing for 4 hours is your target, then you need to be doing those longer rides, which will help you build that longer cardio. If we break Hattah down into shorter components, it's not 4 hours of consistent riding. It's little micro sections of effort and micro sections of rest sprinkled all the way through the 4 hours. You might have some parts of the track that are really whooped out, really physically demanding, use a lot of effort, they exert you a lot. And you might have other parts of that same track, so at Hattah, whereas it might be a bit of a straight, you get a bit of a rest, or maybe you're going around a corner that's got a bit of a berm and you can sit down and recharge for a few seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. So the level of exertion is always going from high to lower, high, lower, high, lower, high, lower. It's like intervals, right? So that's why we've got to use interval training during the week. So you can use like circuit training, where you have a minute on each station and you hop around as quick as you can for 10 or 15 minutes. You can do intervals on the rail, where you do like a minute sprint, a minute rest, a minute sprint, a minute rest for 15 minutes. The goal here is not endurance. The endurance we're doing on the bike, the goal here is intensity. We're trying to get your body to work really, really hard, really get your heart rate up and get you breathing hard. And that's why the intervals are effective at helping with race day. I need to lose weight between now and Hattah Desert Race. What would you recommend? So what we do with our guys is we get them tracking their calories each day. We've got a paid tracking app that we use, but you can use a free one, which is called MyFitnessPal. What this will allow you to do is to log all of your food. So you need to find a calorie target, which you could probably find in MyFitnessPal as well, for what you weigh, how tall you are, and what your goal weight is. That's going to give you a calorie target. You then want to track your food every day to make sure that you are hitting that amount of calories to lose the amount of weight that you want to lose each week. If you do that properly, you should be able to lose about 1 kilo of body fat each week, which is the target that we work on. So if you need to lose 10 kilos, put aside, somewhere between 10 to 15 weeks to allow you to be able to do that. Good thing about the calorie counting to get you to lose weight is it gives you a bit of flexibility with what you're eating. It's not like, oh, I'm doing keto, or I'm doing plant-based, or oh, I'm only doing carnivore and eating meat all the time. Calorie counting is great because it gives you the flexibility to go out on the weekends. If you still want to have a bit of ice cream or have a beer, you can still do that without feeling like you're ruining all your progress, and still be able to lose weight at the same time. And that's without banging on too much about this, that's the biggest thing with weight loss is consistency. You're not going to lose 10 kilos overnight. You need to do it for at least 10 to 15 weeks to be able to get to where you want to go. And then that's the easy part. You need to be able to keep that up after that 10 or 15 weeks. So look for a way of doing things that allows you to be able to keep this up for a long period of time, not something that you go hard for 8 weeks and then go, shit, I'm glad that's over, and then go back to what you were doing before, because your body's going to go back to what you were doing before as well. Why do I keep getting hurt doing desert racing? That's a good question, because a lot of people do get hurt doing desert racing. Over the last 9 or 10 years, like just being around riding and racing, obviously you do see a lot of accidents and you do see things come up consistently. The things that I generally see with people that get hurt a lot is they ride outside of their comfort zone. Their skill level's here, but they're always trying to ride here. And so what happens is they're riding faster than what they're actually capable of. They don't have the skills to be riding here. And you know that that's you. So I know when I was racing, like you know when a crash is coming, right? Very rarely does a crash just come out of nowhere. You usually have these little warning signs, these little bobbles, like the front end washes out, the back end kicks up or kicks out. Something happens that is like the sequence of events that leads to that big crash. Not always, but a lot of the time. So you'll know if that's you. The second thing I see here is people go out too hard. They seem to get excited with these big races. And I find it's more so for the guys that haven't done as much racing, is they get caught up in the hype of racing and they go out there and they write themselves off within the first half an hour of riding. And so in that case, it's nothing to do with fatigue or being tired. It's just getting too excited, going too hard, getting caught up in the moment and not thinking about, hey, I've got to do this for 4 hours. It's not a half an hour race. Third thing I'd say that I see is guys just not fit enough. It's like they get to that second half of the race, and when you're not fit enough and you're fatigued and you get tired and you can't hang on, and the track's the roughest it's been all day, you're going to make mistakes, like lapses in concentration, and more so with desert racing, because you're going so quick. If you're going, 70, 80, 90, 100, over 100 kilometers an hour, they're fast speed. So like a tiniest lapse in concentration or fatigue, and it's like 1 minute you're up racing, and the next minute you've hit a tree or you've been kicked off and you're on the floor going, shit, what happened? And you can't even remember what's happened because it's all happened so quickly. And most of the time that's just due to fatigue. It's like you have those lapses in fatigue. You haven't trained properly. You haven't been used to riding for 4 hours on the bike at a time. You've been doing like, say, half an hour rides, and then you try to push yourself for 4 hours. It's just lack of preparation. So if you can put the preparation time in, that's going to make sure that you can do the best you can when you get out there on race day and put yourself in the safest position to finish the race, come back safe, and be able to go back to work on Monday. I see a lot of pros tracking their heart rate at training. What's the best heart rate monitor to use? I'm probably the worst person to ask for heart rate monitoring because I don't do any heart rate monitoring. I have done it personally. We have riders that track their heart rate or have different polar heart rate monitors. I use a Whoop strap before, which track my heart rate. I don't find it very effective for what we do with our riders. I feel like people put an overemphasis on heart rate. The thing that we're looking for is we want to improve fitness and strength. We want our fitness metrics improving and we want our strength metrics improving. If we can do that with the right exercises and the right type of training, then we know that will transfer best over to riding. Heart rate is really irrelevant. Some people have a higher heart rate, some people have a lower heart rate. Ultimately, what we want to do is we want to be able to have endurance. That's the thing we're focusing on. A lower heart rate doesn't always mean you're going to be fitter on the bike. Having a higher max heart rate doesn't mean you're going to be better on the bike. it's really irrelevant with what we're trying to do on the bike. The things we're trying to improve on the bike is we're trying to get your endurance better, we're trying to get your cardio better, we're trying to get your strength better. As long as we've got those numbers going up, that's great. Whether you can do that with your heart rate at 70 or your heart rate at 50 or your heart rate at 100, it doesn't matter. The thing that we're trying to do is improve those metrics for you so that you can get better transfer over to the bike. Should I use race fuel for Hattah Desert Race? It's a good question. If you want to spend the money on it, I guess there's heaps of stuff that you can spend money on to make your bike go faster. The thing I always look at with improvement overall is I put it into 3 baskets. Does the skills need to be improved? Is that the lagging thing? Does the bike setup and bike need to be improved? Or does the riding fitness need to be improved? And then find which category you need to work on. And then generally, that's where you should be investing your time and money to be able to see improvement on the bike. So for example, like if you're really, really fit and you've got a brand new bike and it's all set up, but your bike skills are terrible, you probably need to go and see a riding coach. So you probably, like, it doesn't matter how good the fuel is, you can put bloody rocket fuel in there and it's not gonna matter. You need to be able to go and work on the skills. That's the lagging thing. Obviously the guys we work with, it's fitness, right? So they've got the skills, they've got a bike set up. It's the fitness thing that's lagging behind. So that's the thing that they need help with. Or maybe it's the bike. Very rarely is it the bike, but it can be the bike. Like if you're riding an old bike that's not set up for a 100 kilo rider and you're 70 kilos, then it's probably gonna be really, really hard to ride that bike. So that's probably the thing you need to work on. Doesn't matter if it's got race fuel in it or not because it's still not set up properly. That's gonna be the thing that holds you back. So you'd probably be better off taking the money you'd put into race fuel and put it into the area that's gonna help you the most to get better with your racing. I'm trying to strengthen the weaker parts of my body for Hattah Desert Race. Do you have any good exercises for the legs? So probably a question for the question is, why are your legs fatiguing? Is probably the question I'd ask. So it doesn't always, just because your legs get tired, it doesn't mean that they're the problem. It could be a nutrition problem. If you're running out of fuel, for example, you're not carb loading properly and fueling your body with the right food, it doesn't matter what training you do. Everything's gonna hurt all of the time because your body's got no fuel. It's like your bike. You can get, white power suspension, go and get the motor done at Pro Circuit, get a full FMF power bomb kit, all the rest of it done to your bike and get it going as quick as you can. If it's got no fuel in it, it's not gonna go. If it's got shitty 91 fuel in it, probably not gonna go very well. It's the same for your body. You can be fit and strong and all the rest of it. If you don't put fuel in your body or don't put the proper fuel in, then it's not gonna matter anyway. So that'll be the first thing. The second thing is we don't isolate exercises with our training with our guys because that's not how the body works on the bike. When you're out on the bike, you've got your whole body working together as one system. You never have your core working at 100% and the rest of your body doing 0. You never have your legs working at 100% and the rest of your body doing 0. You never have your biceps working at 100% and the rest of your body doing 0. Everything from head to toe in your body is working at once in some degree or another. And that's what makes riding and racing so hard, is you've got so many muscles working at once. So we want to make sure when we're doing our strength work, we're getting our whole body working together as a system like it is on the bike. If legs are the problem, you still want to get them working with the rest of the body. So you can use an exercise like a back squat, for example, or you could use a deadlift, which is great. You want to avoid things like, say, doing leg press or leg extensions, which is what I did when I was racing, because that's isolating muscle groups. When I'm doing a leg extension, the rest of my body's pretty relaxed and my legs are just doing all the work. And that's not what's happening when we go and ride. This is my first Hattah Desert Race. Anything you'd recommend to get ready? That's cool. So first desert race, I would say going in for your first time is do as much research as you can, which you probably already are, watching videos and having a look at the track. I'd say the biggest thing for Hattah is it's skills and fitness. They're the two main things. And bike, obviously bike setup, those 3 things we just spoke about before. It's making sure you've got all 3 of those nailed. So it's getting consistent bike time, even if that's only once a week or once a fortnight, make sure you're getting 3 to 4 hour rides. That's probably one of the big things I see is guys, for some reason, do like half-hour rides every weekend and then go and do a 4-hour race. It's not gonna work. Like, well, it can work, you're gonna do it, I'm sure you can make it through, but it's not gonna be fun, you're not gonna do well. You need to be getting on the bike for long periods of time and know what it feels like. I actually had someone who messaged me the other day who said they were doing a desert race for 4 hours, and the way that they were practicing for that was they were doing 50 minutes and then resting for 20 minutes and then doing 50 minutes and then resting for 20 minutes around a motocross track. The problem with that approach is it's nothing like what's going to happen out on the track. Number one, riding a motocross track and riding a desert race, 2 completely different things, 2 different levels of average speed. And the second thing is, for this particular rider, you're not going to get 20-minute breaks out on race day every 50 minutes. So the level of transfer you're going to get from like your practice to your racing is going to be very minimal. And that's even forgetting that you're going to be riding harder on race day because you're in a racing environment compared to just your practice environment. So you've got to make sure that your riding is on track. And then you've also got to make sure your off the bike training's on track as well. Like we spoke about in previous questions, is making sure that your strength's dialed in, making sure that your cardio's dialed in so that you can get the best result on race day and be consistent with the skills you've got. If you've got the riding skills there already, usually what happens is riders' skills start up here. They look like an A-level rider or a B-level rider or a top C rider, and then they deteriorate. They look like a completely different rider at hour 4. So the better your fitness, the better your strength, the more consistent you can keep your skills all the way through the race, rather than just having really good skills at the start of the race and then looking like a bit of a Gumby at the end of the race. What should I do on the bike while practicing to be ready for Hattah Desert Race? You want to make sure that the riding and the riding durations you're doing are matching up with the riding duration of your race. So Hattah is a 4-hour desert race, if not a little bit more. So you want to make sure that the practice rides you're doing are in that 3 to 4 hour range. And so if you're not going to be having rest breaks for half an hour out at Hattah, then you want to make sure that in your practice rides, you're not having rest breaks for half an hour. You want to have conditions where you can ride for a solid 3 or 4 hours with a limited amount of breaks. The constraints being for a lot of people is number 1, sometimes they go and ride on their own and that can be a problem. Number 2, which is worse, sometimes they go and ride with mates that are more casual riders rather than preparing for a race, and they really hold you back. They're really an anchor. So what I'd encourage you to do if that's the case, go and find some mates that are preparing for the race, go and, I don't know, jump on a Facebook group, post on the Hattah Desert page, find some buddies that are preparing for the race that you can go and ride with, that are going to keep riding and keep going, not hold you back and keep stopping every half an hour, because it's not going to give you the best preparation for race day. Race day is going to be hard enough as it is. Doing a 4-hour race at a higher intensity than what you've probably ever ridden before. Even if you do all the practicing with no breaks, it's still not going to be 100% what you're going to get at Hattah, but it's going to close that gap. You're going to have a gap like this rather than a gap like this. What type of cardio should I be doing for Hattah Desert Race? So you want to be doing the 2 types of cardio. You want to be using your longer endurance cardio, but you want to be doing that on the bike. What I see a lot of riders do is they try and do heaps of cycling and heaps of running and try and do that during the week, and it's just not going to be as effective as being on the bike for a 3 or 4 hour period, say even if it's only once a week or once a fortnight. And the reason is because getting on a rowing machine for 4 hours is a very different stimulus. It's a completely different movement to wrestling around a 100 kilo bike for 4 hours. There's no way you can replicate that with long duration training. What you can replicate though is the high and low levels of intensity that you're going through over the race. So again, like some parts of the track are whooped out, really exert you, take a lot of effort. Other parts of the track are a bit of a rest, like the straights where you get a bit of recharge time. The effort exertion's constantly going like this, high, low, high, low, high, low. That's where your interval training comes in. So I recommend for your riding, do longer rides when you do get on the bike. And then with your training during the week in the gym, that's where you do your interval work and work on the short, sharp stuff to get your cardio system nailed. I'm doing some group fitness classes. Will this get me fit for Hattah Desert Race? In my experience, probably not, because group classes are designed for general fitness and general well-being. If you look at like F45 or general group fitness classes, they're all based around circuit training and doing light weights. The biggest thing being, we're not muscling around light weights when we go and ride. We've got a 100, 110 kilo bike that we're trying to wrestle around. So what we want to do is make sure that we're getting ourselves as strong as we can, and that means using heavy weights and knowing which exercises to use. If you're going to just a generic group fitness class, yes, is it going to be better than doing nothing? 100%, of course it is, but it's just not going to build the strength that you need to be able to get you ready to muscle around a 110 kilo bike for 4 hours. How much bike time do I need to be ready for Hattah Desert Race? Again, you need to be able to make sure that the bike time you're getting is in roughly the same domain as what you're planning on racing. So the race is about 4 hours, okay? If not a little bit longer, depending on when you go through for the last lap. So you need to make sure that your practice rides are a similar length, okay? The race is always going to be harder because you're in a racing environment and racing intensity. No matter how hard you practice, the racing is always going to be harder. You're always going to be pushing more than what you have in your practice rides. What you want to work on is the duration. Okay, a lot of times I see guys that go and practice for half an hour, again on a motocross track, and then they're trying to go out to Hattah Desert Race and ride for 4 hours. It's like running a marathon. Like if you want to run a 42K marathon, and there's no point in doing 5K runs every week trying to get ready to run 42Ks. If you want to run 42Ks, you probably need to be putting a fair few Ks into your legs to be ready to run a marathon. So you need to look at it the same way. I told my PT what it's like to ride and that I need core strength. What else should I tell him to get me doing at the gym? Probably the first thing that comes to mind there is I'd probably say that's a red flag for me. Whenever I chat to people and they have a coach or they've had a personal trainer and they're telling the personal trainer what they need to do, then I feel like you've got the wrong person that you're working with. Okay, if you're telling them what they need to give you, then you might as well just go train on your own. What do you need a PT for to tell you to do exercises that you're telling them to do. It doesn't make sense to me. It should be the other way around. The person you're working with should be telling you what you need to do and pulling you up on the thing. When you say, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that, they should be saying, yeah, this is what we need to do, or no, that's actually the wrong thing to do. We need to be doing something else. We need to think about it this way rather than thinking about it that way. It's a common thing that when people come to me, they're like, oh, Andrew, I need to do lots of endurance and lots of cardio. And then I'll explain to them about the strength in the 100-kilo bike. And then we get to the end of the call and they've started off, oh, I need endurance. And now they're going, oh, shit, Andrew, I need strength. They've gone the complete opposite way to what they thought they needed. So that would be the first thing that I would bring up. The second thing, if you still enjoy working with them and that's what you want to do, you're happy with that dynamic, then I would focus on strength and cardio, more interval work. Doing like back squats, deadlifts, overhead presses, bent over rows are great for strength. And then doing some sort of circuit training or interval training for your cardio is going to get you most of the way there. Should I just do light weights for high reps to build endurance for Hattah Desert Race? Short answer to that is no. And this is one I hear a lot, and probably one of the big changes we make with a lot of our riders when they first start working with us, is to build endurance on the bike is very different to building endurance for a cycling race or a running race. The big difference being the 100-kilo motorbike that you have to wrestle around that all riders seem to forget about. So you've got your rider weight, let's say you weigh 80 kilos, let's say your bike weighs 110. You got 80 and 110 together. That's 190 kilos you need to wrestle around for a 4-hour race at Hattah. That's a lot of weight compared to doing a 4-hour cycling race where you're wrestling around a 4 or 5 kilo cycling bike. The best way to be able to build endurance is not by doing lots of reps with lighter weights. And I'll explain why. Let's say the most you can squat, okay, let's say a back squat with the bar, it's like a bar I've got back here. Let's say you put that on your back. Let's say the most you can squat for one rep is 50 kilos, okay? So your absolute most. If I stripped all the weights off and I just gave you an empty bar which weighs 20 kilos, how many reps do you reckon you could do with the 20 kilo bar? So come up with a number, okay? Let's say it's 10, for example. Now let's say you put the hard work in, and let's say we just worked on your overall strength. Let's say we got your maximum squat from 50 kilos for 1 rep, and we doubled it all the way up to 100 kilos. So now the most that you can squat for 1 rep is 100 kilos, not 50. If I gave you a 20 kilo bar again, so an empty bar with no weights, how many reps do you reckon you could get with that 20 kilo bar now? More than 10? Probably, right? Probably maybe around the 20 mark. So what's happened there is your endurance moving that 20 kilos has increased by increasing your overall strength. It's not increasing by doing shit tons of reps with a 20 kilo weight bar. So that's why I put so much emphasis on improving overall strength, because that's going to improve your endurance. That's going to make the lighter weights feel lighter. If you can get them to feel lighter, you can wrestle them around for a longer period of time a lot easier. And that includes the bike as well. I had a mate who said that he just cycles to get ready for Hattah, but in your videos you said that's not going to be enough. Not sure what to do. Good question, and fair enough. So what I find with a lot of people, and it was the same with me when I was racing, is I used to get advice from other people at the track. And the problem is with getting advice from people at the track, well, this is what I found, is that number one, no one actually worked with other riders. Okay, they're just basing it off their own experience with them, a person of one. Not oh, I've worked with 500 people and this is what we do and this is how it works. It's like, oh, this is what I do. And so what would happen when I was racing is I'd speak to one person, they say, yeah, you need to do lots of cycling, don't lift weights because you're going to get up. Then I chat to someone else, they say, no, you need to lift weights because you need the endurance, but just make sure you lift light weights with high reps. I was like, okay. Then you chat to someone else and they're like, oh, no, don't do weights. Don't worry about the endurance stuff. It's just bike time. You can't replicate bike time in the gym, so don't even worry about bike time. Just try and ride as much as you can. And so you end up more confused than actually helped, right? You don't, instead of doing some research and asking people, instead of having a better solution and being more clear on what you do, you end up more confused. And so you end up chopping and changing your training every week because you're not sure what to do, because every time you start with one thing, you get new information that comes in which makes you question what you're doing, and then you hop on to the next thing, and so you never get results with anything because you never stick with it long enough because you're always confused. So yes, like everyone is different. Genetically, everyone is different. Some people are really fit, just naturally. There was a guy that I used to race motocross with, and we used to pit together, and he always had a six-pack, always had like a good physique, quite muscly, and I remember he was getting changed, we were getting changed before we were getting ready to go out for a race, and I was like, shit, I was like, you've been hitting the gym hard. And he goes, oh, no, I actually haven't been to the gym for a few months. He's like, yeah, I've got to get back into it. And I was like, what? I was like, I train like 4 times a week, 5 times a week, training hard, trying to eat the right stuff, trying to do all the right stuff, and I still don't look like this bloke. And this bloke looks ripped as, and he's done absolutely nothing. And unfortunately, there is people out there that are like that. There's a lot of personal trainers out there that are like that, that just have a great physique, okay? They have won the genetic lottery. And there's people on the opposite end of the spectrum. And I would put myself in that category. I have to work very, very hard to be able to get lean, to be able to look a certain way, to be able to be strong. As soon as I stop training or have some time off, it's like, everything goes backwards, or it feels like very, very quickly. The other thing that comes up is sometimes other people do more bike time. Okay, so they might build a lot of their fitness and strength through riding all of the time. So maybe for your friend that you're mentioning, maybe he does a lot of bike time and that's where he builds most of his fitness and strength, and the cycling's just a nice to have. Even if he didn't do the cycling, he'd still be fit on the bike. Maybe he's just won the genetic lottery and he seems to be fit and strong and rides well. Maybe he has a riding style that doesn't use very much energy and he's very, very smooth on the bike. And so maybe that helps him out on the bike. That's probably all I've got. All I could say is make up your own mind. The way that we explain it to riders is you've got a 110 kilo bike and you've got your riding weight on top of that. If you're weighing 80 kilos, that's 190 kilos you need to wrestle around. So there's no amount of cycling you can do that's going to make that 190 kilos feel lighter. Maybe if your friend started doing some strength training, maybe he'd get even better results and feel even better on the bike rather than just sticking with the cycling. Who knows? I usually hit the wall after the 2-hour mark at Hattah Desert Race. What can I do to fix this? So if you're hitting the wall at the 2-hour mark, there's probably two things I'd say. First thing I'd say that comes up is your nutrition is not great. You either haven't fueled properly before the race or you haven't fueled properly during the race, or both. If you're hitting the wall, that means you have had energy and then it's dropped off, or you have had fitness and then it's dropped off. It's making sure that you get your 30 to 45 grams of carbs in for every hour of riding, get a couple of carb gels in every hour, get your Powerades in, and then making sure that you do really, really well with breakfast and even dinner the night before. Get a serving of protein in, but it's the complex carbs. It's the sweet potato, brown rice, quinoa that we really want to load up on to make sure that our muscles have glycogen in them. Glycogen is like our stored carbohydrate, our stored fuel tank, and we want to make sure that that is topped up as much as it possibly can be going into the race. Second reason that you'd hit the wall is you just don't have the fitness there. Maybe you've got good skills on the bike and you've been pushing hard and you've relied on that, and then after 2 hours it's just gone new. So that would come back to looking at what you're doing in the gym, looking at your preparation with riding. So nutrition would be the thing I look at, and then also look at the training to see where things are breaking down. What are the top 3 mistakes you see riders making when they prepare for Hattah Desert Race? I'd probably say not being organized far enough out with their training and their riding. So you're gonna need a good patch of time. You're gonna need a good few months there to be able to build the fitness and strength you need for the bike. Cardio you can build relatively quickly. Strength takes a while to build and get the benefits from. So you need to start earlier. The earlier you can start, the better. If you can start 12 months out, great, awesome. If you can do some other races in the meantime to keep you motivated along those 12 months, then that's awesome. That's gonna put you in a great position. But you need the time there, number one. And then number two, you've got to make sure you're doing the right stuff. When it comes time to train, you need to know, all right, this is what I'm doing for 12 weeks, 16 weeks, 20 weeks, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is. You need to know this is the stuff that I need to do. Not get 12 months beforehand and start running 1 week and then do weights the next week and then do yoga the next week and then Pilates the next week and then start doing keto the next week and then carnivore the next week and then smash magnesium for 7 days a week after that. You need to know exactly what you're doing. 3 months beforehand is not the time to experiment. That's the time that you really need to step it up and be consistent with your training. So if I was to narrow it down into, there's probably 3 things in there, but that's the main thing, is just getting organized with doing the right stuff. And same with the food on race day. Making sure that your food's dialed in on race day so you know what to have at your fuel stops. You know what to have before the race. So you're fueled up, and then making sure you've done some practice rides testing that out. There was a guy I was chatting to the other day who had done Don River Dash last year and rocked up. Wasn't really a racer, but decided to do the race, was having drinks the night before, alcoholic drinks, and then wanted to do it the next year, but wanted to step it up and take it more seriously. So he started doing a little bit of training. He was walking his dog, having magnesium, doing BCAAs, chucked a whole heap of stuff in his camelback, and actually felt worse and got a worse result. And so the problem for him there is he didn't test anything out beforehand. He kind of just threw the kitchen sink at it, tested it all out on race day, and felt worse. So that's why it's really important to prepare beforehand. Do a practice ride or a practice race where you test out all of the stuff you're going to do on race day before the race day. Race day is not a testing ground. Race day is I've done all the hard work, let's enjoy it and just focus on racing. Not, I'm going to try 20 different products and 20 different ways of doing things on this race day and I should be a superstar, because it's not going to work that way. A worst case scenario like for this rider that I was talking about, go backwards and it's the opposite way. Why am I fit in the gym and when I practice but get arm pump and out of breath at Hattah Desert Race? The reason this happens is because the gap between your racing intensity and your practice intensity and strength and fitness training is too big. So the reason this happens is when we all get in a competitive environment, we all push harder. Okay, all of us. It's just a natural instinct. When you're in that competitive environment, you're on race day, you push yourself a lot harder than what you can on a practice day. Even if you're really trying on a practice day and give it 100%, 100% is different on race day compared to a practice day. So what you want to do is bridge that gap as much as you can between race day intensity and practice intensity. The way that you do that is try and practice how you race as close as you can. So if you're doing a 4-hour race, do 3 or 4 hour rides. If you're doing a 4-hour race and you're not having any breaks, go and do practice rides for 3 or 4 hours and don't have any breaks. Don't stop for half an hour breaks and recharge and then expect that to transfer over well to Hattah desert race. The other thing is you're not doing the right training. If you're not doing the right off the bike training, so like you're doing your 5K runs 3 times a week and you're pounding the pavement with that, which is the complete opposite of what we need for when we go and race, then you might see improvement in your running and you might consider yourself fit. You might say, oh, I'm a fit person, I can run 5Ks, I can do this, I can do that, but when I get on the bike, I don't feel fit. It's just because you haven't got the right type of fitness. Fitness is not like I'm fit or not fit, it's am I fit for the sport that I want to do? So for example, for me, there was an example, I think it was probably before COVID, where I wasn't doing any cardio, any running stuff, and I was just focusing a lot on my strength. I could back squat over 150 kilos for multiple reps. Used to do heaps of squats, had super, super strong legs. And I remember doing this group fitness workout where we did a whole heap of running. We did probably 5 200-meter runs, not much running, right? And I remember my legs were so sore the next day from doing those runs. Okay, I could do all of these squats with a whole heap of heavy weight, but my legs were still so sore after running. It's like, how could my legs be sore after doing some running when I can squat so much and I've been doing so much squatting? That's because there's different types of fitness and different types of strength. My legs are fit and strong for lifting weights and moving in a particular movement. They're not fit and strong for running. They're not used to smacking the pavement 1,000 times in a workout because that's not what my training is part of. I wouldn't be able to go and run a marathon because my legs aren't conditioned for that because I don't do any running. So you have to make sure that the training you're doing is actually going to transfer and actually correlates over to what you're doing with your racing. Not just made up of random exercises that get your heart rate up that aren't really too effective for your riding. I can't stomach food on race day but run out of energy. Any ideas on what to do? Yes. So the reason that you run out of energy and that you can't stomach food is because you're nervous and you're stressed. There's anxiety there, and that's normal for a racing day. If it's your first race or you haven't done much racing, that anxiety is probably going to be a lot higher in comparison to, say, a factory rider which is used to doing big races all the time. So what happens is when your body's stressed, your digestive system shuts down and doesn't work, okay, or doesn't work very well. So any food that you put in doesn't get digested, it's going to sit up here, you're going to feel shit, and more importantly, even if you do force it in, you're not going to get the energy from the food because you're not breaking it down. So the way we bypass this is we use supplements or use liquids. So this is where your carb drinks, carb powders, protein powders come in because they're going to allow you to get the energy that you need throughout the race day without actually having to stomach real food. So again, have your carb gels, 30 to 45 grams of carbs for every hour of riding. Use a carb gel or a Powerade or a carb drink. And then you can even use them in the morning. You can use things like even protein oats. If you can water down like protein oats, that's probably a good breakfast for you. If you know that you struggle to stomach food, give yourself a lot of extra time. So 4 hours might not be enough. You might need to go 5 hours earlier, okay? Or 4 hours might be okay. But again, try and test it out as best you can beforehand. Don't just do whatever you do before and then go, oh, I'm going to try protein oats on race day because you don't know how you're going to respond. You don't know how you're going to feel. Do a practice run with it. Get out to some practice races, give it a test run, and then make sure that you're ready for Hattah. And doing that, it's also going to give you more confidence because when you're confident in how you're going to feel and what you need to do on race day, you're going to be less stressed. People tend to be more stressed when they're doing a whole heap of random shit when it comes to race day because they're just trying to cover all bases and everything that they've ever heard and all their mates are telling them different things at the track and they're trying to do everything all at once, which ends up making them feel worse, not actually feeling better. Excuses riders make for not doing well at Hattah desert race. Probably the big one I hear for that one is, oh, I didn't get enough bike time. But most of the time, 9.9 times out of 10, it's not that they didn't get enough bike time. Everyone thinks they just need to ride more to get better, okay? And most of you do ride enough. If you're riding once a week, that's great. If you're riding once every couple of weeks, okay, awesome. That's enough to be able to see progress. If you've got your riding structured well, you're doing 3 or 4 hour rides to get ready for Hattah. Obviously, the more riding you can do, the better. If you can ride 4 times a week, good on you, great. You're gonna build a lot of strength and fitness and skill just through riding more. But for most of you, you don't have access to that. So to use that as an excuse for not performing well, you can't really use it because there's no way of fixing it. There's no way of fixing that problem unless you decide to quit your job, go full time, get a factory ride, and happy days. Or maybe you win the lotto and you can do it that way. Most of the time, it's not about the bike time. Most of the time people say, oh, I need more bike time. And then I ask, okay, what would more bike time give you? Oh, well, I'd be fitter. I wouldn't get fatigued as much. I wouldn't get as tired. Oh, okay. So it's not really a bike time problem. It's a fitness problem. And then they go, yeah, it is a fitness problem, but there's no fitness like actually riding the bike. Well, that is true, but you can get things that are bloody well close. And that's all the stuff that we do off the bike. So most of the time, that people that make those types of comments are the people that don't know how to train off the bike correctly. They're doing the wrong stuff that's either not doing anything and they just think they need to ride, or they are in the gym doing stuff, but they're doing the wrong stuff that's not actually helping them with their riding, which leads them to believe that, hey, I'm doing the wrong stuff, it's not building my fitness, there's something wrong with the gym, there's no gym workouts out there that can help me, I just need to ride more, and I can't ride more, so I can't get better, so I'll just have to stay where I am. Should I work on my riding skills or off-bike training more to be ready for Hattah Desert Race? Answer is both, especially for Hattah. Like, it's such a physical race. So even if you've got great skills there and you've got a whole heap of bike time, you're probably going to need to do a fair bit of work off the bike as well to make sure that your body's ready, unless you're riding, 4 or 5 times a week, which most of you probably aren't. Set up a riding schedule for yourself of how long you're going to ride for, get some riding buddies together, make sure that you're riding consistently, and then make sure you have some sort of program, structure, workouts that you're following off the bike to be able to help build fitness and strength in between your rides as well. Should I train less in the last 4 weeks before Hattah Desert Race so I'm not burnt out and can peak at Hattah Desert Race? Common question, no. Our guys train consistently all the way up to Hattah with the same level of volume. Sometimes we'll taper the last 1 or 2 sessions and just drop the volume down a little bit, less weights, just so there's no soreness or fatigue and they're fresh. I chat to a lot of guys that think that they need to be able to taper for the last 4 weeks like they're an Olympic athlete. If you're not an Olympic athlete and you're not training all the time and don't do this for a living, if you're tapering every 4 weeks for a race, then you're probably going to spend the whole year tapering. Leading into the race for our guys, we do 3 training sessions each week. And those sessions last about 45 minutes. Part of it's made of strength, part of it's made of cardio. So if we can do that and we can keep that up, we know that we're going to have them ready to be able to go and race. The common problem I see, and the reason why people ask me if they need to taper, is because they're doing too much training. So they think that they need to be training all the time and training twice a day and doing 10 CrossFit sessions and training in mornings and afternoons and weekends and training for 2 hours at a time. And so they burn themselves out. And when they think of that, they're like, oh shit, that's a lot of training. Shit, I'm not going to be able to keep that up. This is exhausting me. This is making me worse. So that's why they think they need to have all of this time off. When in reality, they're doing the wrong training. They're not doing the right stuff. They're doing too much stuff. They need to cut all of their training back, probably in half or a third of what they think they need to do, and just do the right stuff. And when they can do that, then they can train all year long and they can keep making progress the whole time. So for our guys, we have guys that have trained with us for up to 5, 6 years and just consistent every week, hitting their sessions, ticking them off. You wouldn't be able to train for 5 or 6 years straight if you were flogging yourself into the ground, trying to fit in full-time work, trying to fit in a family, and all the rest of it. So you probably need to not look at tapering, you probably need to look at, okay, the training approach I've got is too much volume, too much stuff. What can I do to cut away all of the fluff and all of the crap? Just focus on the stuff that I need to do that actually helps me on the bike, so I can do less training, so I can keep it up for a longer period of time and not worry about trying to put it on hold or trying to escape from doing my training all the time. I normally run top 300, but want to crack the top 200. What should I do? Good question. So you've got a gap there. You want to go from 300 to 200, which is great, awesome for setting a decent target. Now what you've got to identify is what is the weakest link? What is the thing that's stopping you from getting in the top 200? So reflect on your last Hattah Desert Races. Are you not fast enough? Maybe your skills are not good enough to be able to be a top 200 rider. Even if you kept your pace and your speed from lap 1 all the way to the end of the race, you still wouldn't be in the top 200, then you need to get better with your skills. You need to get faster. So get a riding coach, go and spend more time on the bike, look for some YouTube drills to do, go and ride in desert racing conditions more. Heaps of stuff that you can do to improve your skills. Second thing, maybe it's your bike setup. If your bike's set up terribly and it feels like it's going to kick you off all the time and you feel like you're going to die, then you're probably not going to ride it very hard. So maybe you need to get your bike set up properly. Maybe that means having an up-to-date bike. If your bike's 10 years old, maybe that's a problem. Maybe the suspension's set up for a 100 kilo rider and you're 70 kilos. Maybe that's a problem. Look at those things. Third thing, fitness. Maybe you're not fit enough. Maybe you are quick at the start and you can maintain that top 200 pace at the start, but then you get to the end of the race and you drop off and you drop back to the top 300. Maybe you prologue really well. A good identifier for this is probably like you prologue really well and then you drop back throughout the race rather than moving forward. In that scenario, then you need to work on your fitness. So it's working on your off the bike training, making sure you have the right workouts and structure there to be able to get you through the race so you can maintain your skills all the way through the race. There's no point in making the bike better or making your skills better if your fitness isn't there to be able to carry that all along, all the way through the race.